Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com. Do you remember those fabulous PDQ Bach concerts? Remember, they were presented as sort of academic symposia run by Professor Peter Schickele, and he was leading the University of Southern North Dakota at Fourth Symphony Orchestra in the fabulously twisted works of PDQ Bach. Well, this release is really the equivalent of that, except that it's serious, and for that reason, it's just, oh, so sad. It's even tragic. The Schickele person in question is Professor Benjamin Korstvedt, and instead of the University of Southern North Dakota at Fourth, we have the Bamberg Symphony Orchestra under Jakob Hrůša, and I think his name is Hrůša. Yeah, is that it? I mean, I've looked at it. I just want to pronounce it correctly because I owe him at least that much. Not that I will. What does it say that? Does it even give his name? He's not even listed here on the back. He must be in the front. Yes, Jakob Hrůša. And the work in question is, you've seen it coming, Symphony Number 4 by Anton Bruckner. I told you before, there's Bruckner, the good guy, and then there's Bruckner. And my friends in the barn know the difference. So you can tell that this is not going to be a good review. And I'm so sorry for that because I wish it were otherwise. This is the triumph. Here it is, by the way. This is the thing. It represents the triumph of musicology over musicianship. It's dry, it's sterile, it's boring. Holy crap. The performances are so excruciatingly dull, you're not going to believe your ears. But that's almost beside the point, because it's not the performances that matter. What this is an audio lecture demonstration of all of the different versions of the Fourth Symphony that there could possibly be, along with not only the three official, authentic versions of the symphony, but also an extra finale, two extra finales, never mind, two extra interim versions of the finale and a later sort of slightly amended version of the finale, and then little show and tell variants of little tiny, a few bars, a few seconds, just so that we can hear the complete useless contrast of a composer who was a compulsive noodler and who couldn't stop tinkering, and we get to hear some of the tinkers. And it is as dry and sterile a listening experience as I hope never to hear again in my mortal existence. Now, I can't entirely fault Professor Korstvedt. Professor Korstvedt has done tremendous work untangling all of the sketches and versions and variants, and he knows what they all are. But the problem is, and it's the problem with the entire apparatus of Bruckner scholarship, the problem with it is this. A critical edition of a score is supposed to be one thing because it's based on the assumption that a composer who writes a work is doing his best to establish a definitive text at that work. He's not just littering versions, hundreds of versions, saying, well, that's okay, that's okay, that's okay, that's okay. Now, there are some composers who did that. I mean, Liszt sort of did that. Everything he did was different than everything he did the time before, and he never evinced any preference for one thing over the other thing. But one thing we really know about Bruckner, they're on that side this time, is that he wanted to establish a definitive text. of all of his works. He was obsessed with that idea, and he died. He left basically a controversial but fairly clear view of his ideal versions of each symphony. And the ideal version of the fourth is, despite the fact that there was a later version published in 1888, the ideal version of the fourth was the 1878, 1880, 81-ish revision, the second version that is in here. He never heard the first version and probably never intended that the first version be played or revived after he made the revision, because the new version superseded the old version. Get it? The last version was made because he was desperate to get the thing published. He had to pay for it himself. They wouldn't publish it unless he made certain changes. His buddies helped him make certain changes. Apparently, he acquiesced in some of those changes and made some of his own emendations, which don't ratify those changes. That's just doing the inevitable, really, to get the thing through publication. And so he had some hand in it, but it is not either sonically or aesthetically authentic Bruckner. It is not. Or let's put it this way. It's not Bruckner. It's Bruckner. So it doesn't deserve to exist. But Korstvedt has done something which I think is inexcusable as a scholar from an ethical point of view. His job is to establish a clean text of the best version that we have, and really, it's not a question what the best version is. It's the one we've all been listening to, the 1878-80 version. Now, there may be tiny little changes here and there, like whether the opening horn call returns in the last bars of the finale or not. It doesn't matter. There are slight textural differences here and there. None of them matter. What matters is that, on the whole, this is the version of the symphony that we're used to, and that everyone has decided is the best version, the one that best represents the composer. So what do you do when you have Korstvedt's sum total of knowledge about every single pointless, useless, silly detail of notation, and when Bruckner went to the bathroom, he changed something, and you have to publish it separately? Okay, what do? You do what's called a Revisionsberichte in Deutsch, in German, or a Revisionsbericht. You put a list of all of the different changes and variants and things that you've done to clean up the text in the back. And if you need to publish alternative passages, you do it as an appendix, so that interpreters have the full panoply of textual variants at their disposal if they care to look. And if they don't care to look, they can ignore them. If they want to substitute a couple of them in because maybe it's interesting to hear it once in a while, they can. But what you don't do is you do not publish 3 completely independent scores plus extra independent movements and say they're all equal. Everyone just because I'll tell you, let me tell you a story. I'll tell you the attitude that these people have, and that's what distinguishes the kind of scholarship they're doing from what normal good scholarship, in my opinion, really is. I was very, very interested back in the days when I was reading the Talmud, which is, the book of Jewish law, and it's like 70 some odd volumes, and it's unbelievably detailed. Every single point. It's an analysis of the Old Testament, the 5 books, basically, line by line by line, with all of the disputation down through the centuries of various scholars on what it means and what you need to do, and most importantly, what the laws mean and how you should read them and how you should interpret them. And the guy I was studying with, I said to him, look, I said, these people, I understand what's going on here. These people are spending as much time arguing about thou shalt not kill as the width of a cubit and the tree that the cedar comes from that you construct the ark out of, even though that's totally, completely out of date. It has nothing to do with our modern life We couldn't care less about it. It doesn't make any difference. There's no possible relevance to it. But their feeling is, of course, the Talmudic scholars, is that the Word of God is the Word of God. And no single part is any more important than any other part because it's all the Word of God. And thus, all of it is of equal importance and equally deserving of completely exhaustive, totally insanely detailed argumentation. And this kind of hair splitting over tiny little points of law, which is called pilpul, by the way, in Yiddish or Hebrew or whatever language that is. I think it's a Hebrew term, but maybe it's a Yiddish term. I don't know. I grew up, we called it pilpul. But the point is that this is what these people are doing. These scholars are doing. They're saying that every single thing that this man wrote is holy writ and equally important. Nothing is more important than anything else. And that completely falsifies what Bruckner is trying to do. He wanted to have a work of art called Symphony No. 4, the Romantic. One version. It is his misfortune that multiple versions survive. But it is the obligation of the scholars and future generations to decide which of those versions, taking into account all of the evidence that we have of his intentions, of his aesthetics, of his compositional practice, all of the things that we know, which one best represents Symphony No. 4, and to use that so that his best face is always forward, so that listeners and the public only hears the best. Not something provisional, not something sketchy or something unfinished or something that was, a step along the way to something better. We only want the better. No one has time for anything else these days. I mean, we really do. I mean, yes, I understand. There are people who will take this 4-disc set and listen to all of it. There are people like that. There are people who obsess about these things. But if you want to make the best case for the composer, for his work, for his aesthetic, for his expressive message, then you want to get behind the one version that gets the job done most powerfully. And that, everyone's always agreed, it's not a mystery, is the 1878, 1880 version. So if you want to do a new critical edition, sure, go ahead. Clean up a few bars here and there, change a few notes here or there, do what you got to do. But why? Why would you want to tear down, destroy a consensus, a genuine consensus that's over a century in the making as to which version of this symphony best represents the composer's intentions in favor of a lot of scholarly bullshit? Because that's what this is. It's bullshit. It's bullshit from Korstvedt, and it's just excruciatingly dull from Hrůša. I mean, how is it dull? Let's talk about the performances for a minute. They're all the same. I mean, the performances are droopy because the louder and more exciting the music gets, the duller it becomes. And the reason that happens is very similar to all the things that went wrong with the recent Thielemann recording of the first thing, of the same symphony. It's because there's no brass. I mean, there are moments where the trombones at the climaxes vanish entirely. I mean, the first version of the symphony has the worst scherzo that Bruckner ever wrote. One of the worst, probably the worst single movement that he ever wrote. And I know some people like it. Don't tell me you like it. I don't care if you like it. It sucks. It's horrible. You can like things that suck. Just admit it. Live with it. Enjoy it. Own it. Fine. It's terrible. And so Bruckner replaced it, even Korstvedt admits, with the glorious Hunting Scherzo, which has all that fabulous, exciting triplet motion. And as with Thielemann, you don't hear the horns. The horns at the climaxes at the end of each section, they're going cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha, right? Don't hear it at all. They might as well not be there. You don't hear the trombones. You don't hear the cross rhythms. when they're in the first big climax, the first sectional ending, when it's going da 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 da, and the trombones are going yum bum 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 like that. I mean, there's nothing. There's no tension. You hear a wash of timpani and a string tremolo, and that's it. And that's what all these climaxes are like. I mean, it's all the same. Doesn't matter which version. They're all equally boring. And so the performances are completely worthless. And like I said, it's like the University of Southern North Dakota at Hoople, only much less fun. It's an academic exercise. It's like a lecture demonstration. It's not like a performance, an expressive, meaningful performance. And I want to mention something else, because I don't want anybody to say, well, this set was reviewed by, what label is it on? I mean, it's on a label. Does it ever say what label? Oh, Accentus Music. Thank you. To their everlasting shame. Anyway, there is a review of this, a very positive review of it, on MusicWeb. And I mention it because I don't want to hear someone say, well, a guy loved it on MusicWeb. Well, the guy who reviewed it for MusicWeb is a member of the Bruckner Society. And of course they love it. What do you think? It's like a Jehovah's Witness reviewing the Watchtower's latest newsletter. I mean, what do you expect when cult members review the work of other cult members? But it sucks. It's just bad. It's boring. And more to the point, why would anyone want to hear 4 discs of the same damn piece? He's just not that interesting. I'm sorry to say, great though he is. I mean, not even Beethoven or Mozart get that kind of attention for the same work. I mean, Mozart, when he wrote his G minor symphony, remember? He revised it, and he substituted the clarinets for oboes. I mean, he left the oboes in, but all the stuff that they had, he gave to the clarinets, and the oboes do much less in the revised version. Does anybody listen to 2 versions of the G minor symphony, one right after the other, one with the oboes, one with the clarinets? Anybody, for any reason other than a purely academic exercise to see what happened with the texture? So why would anyone want to do this, which is over an hour long in each case practically? I mean, he's going to take you 3 hours and 40 minutes. I don't know what the whole length of this is, but something like that. 3 or 4 hours? 4 hours of this? 4.5 hours of this? I mean, you have to be on drugs. You really do. So just don't waste your time, and pray that somehow sanity returns, and that this represents the utmost limit of insanity that ever happens with one of these symphonies. I mean, can you imagine them doing this with all the different versions of the Eighth? Ooh. I mean, it could happen. It could happen because there's an interim version of the Eighth, too. So that means there are 3 versions of the Eighth, and that's like 1 hour and 20 minutes long. Plus variants and other things. And, oh, good Lord. It's such a disservice. Such a disservice to Bruckner. I guess not to Bruckner. No. So, I listen to this so that you can keep on listening to other things. Take care. Thank you so much for joining me.